What up, Marsh Pod? Talking a little Oceania, one of the more surprising teams of the last week or so. Actually, more than that, multiple weeks. Talk about the run they have in dissecting. Should we believe it, or is this just a phantom and an outcome of the schedule? We're recording this late Monday night, and we're looking at the SimWorld Oceania squad led by head coach Elijah Wheeler, team that has the reigning SimWorld Hoops Player of the Week, Richard Hennessy. He had a great couple of games to try to figure out where exactly should we peg this team. They've won 5 of 6. They're now 5-8 overall. In a pretty good Pacific Rim division that features 3 teams that you would probably consider among the top 12, top 10, I would say. Probably need to, on a tangent, start adding bad boys into that group, but Showtime Basketball probably the bottom of that top 10 team conversation. But they've done good. They've won 5 of 6, very much under the radar in terms of where this all falls after a very upset-heavy week we had a year ago. So it was worthwhile taking a look at it and asking 3 questions to figure out, should we take Oceania seriously? Because you win 5 of 6 games. It's not nothing. It's a good stretch. It's kind of stabilized their season. They've started to join they potentially joined an ever-growing middle class, but wanted to ask 3 questions. So I took a look. What are 3 things that we can ask that will help us determine, is this a legitimate team? Question 1, do they have a number 1 guy? Yeah, sort of. Number 1 guy probably would be Cole Webb. All right, he can certainly score as a number 1 guy, 16.5 points per game, but the biggest question for him is, can he do it effectively? He shoots 44% from the floor, 30% from deep. Top 10 shooters for context in SimWorld Hoops, all of them 56% or better. If you look at, and we're going off the SimWorld TV rankings, if you look at the top players that are above him, and he's I think 62, only 8 players that you would consider non-bigs that are ranked higher than him are shooting worse from 3, are worse than that 30.4%. That doesn't scream number 1 guy production. The point per game totals are there. I'm not saying they're not, but in the grand scheme of things, what he does doesn't really scream number 1 guy. You can make the case after Player of the Week honors, Richard Hennessy should be the number 1 guy, but I'm a big non-believer in, unless you are ultra dominant, and even then, you're going to have to convince me that a big can be the number 1 guy on a championship team, unless he brings something completely unique to the table. Looking at, Nikola Jokic, unbelievable passer, right? And again, we're 2 totally different levels of competition, but an unbelievable passer. On top of that, a great 3-point shooter. That's why he's been able to survive as a big on the as a number 1 guy as a big. But look at SimWorld Hoops last year. What happened to these teams that had dominant big men? They didn't make it far. So if we're going to sit here and say Richard Hennessy, he who was averaging 10 points, 8 rebounds, 1.2 assists, is your number 1 guy, I get a little concerned that that's where we're going to go. And I get a little concerned about their ceiling. So, do they have a number 1 guy? Maybe, but I'll take a lot other number 1 guys over him. No disrespect to Cole. Does a lot of things well. Just doesn't really shoot the ball well, and unfortunately that's a pretty big part of the game. All right, question number 2. Have they beaten someone impressive? They've won 5 of 6. We went over this. Those wins are against Queen City Kings, who's now 7-8. AT Aliens, who's 7-9. Gotham 5, who's 7-6. Philadelphia, who's 4-10. South America, 5-10. 10 straight losses. So in theory, you'd look at it and you say Gotham 5. Now that's a win because Gotham 5 is a good basketball team. Are we sure about that? Gotham 5 would have been impressive, but they've lost 4 in a row. They just fired head coach Tim Bellardi, and things are looking really troublesome underneath the hood of that car. I don't think that at this point in time we look at Gotham 5, especially without Tim Bellardi, and say that's a top team. That's a win you hang your hat on. It's a good win. It was a great win, but now as a story unfolds, I'm not so sure it is. Which means your best win of the season is probably against AT Aliens or Queen City Kings, 2 teams under 500. I don't love that as my number 1 wins for a team that I need to start taking seriously. So question 3, how have they fared against teams that we would consider legitimately top? So I'm talking division winners or teams that could be a division winner. Showtime, lost by 11. Best Coast Ballers, lost by 7. Bay Area, lost by 12. Lone Star, good loss, but by 1. Southeast Select, they lost by 22. Then, of course, Gotham 5, who they beat by 8. But we talked about if they should really be there. I'm going to give it to them for now, only because it only slightly helps the conversation. They're 1-5 if you include Gotham 5 against teams that are top in the division. 1 loss to Lone Star was by 1. Other ones, relatively competitive, but not something that they were totally in the game for. Meanwhile, coming up, H-Town, they play on May 18th. Rocky Mountain Monsters, they play on June 7th. No, July 7th, apologies. Bad Boys Basketball, they play on June 8th. They don't even play this season Beasts of the East or the Originators. So they've got 5 games left where we can say they can prove themselves to be worthy of better play. But they still haven't played well when they've had the opportunities to. Sure, there's been a lot of change. I get that. This season has seen a ton of teams looking drastically different from what they started at. Yacht Club is a great recent example. I understand they lost. I get that. But they look like a different basketball team than they did at the start of the season. Some of our top teams look completely different. Best Coast Ballers, missing their number 2 guy. Bay Area has added a number of guys. There's a lot of change. So to just blanketly say, let's take the first month of basketball compared to the second 2 months, and this is all the same, it's not. I get that. But they haven't really done much great against good teams when they've had the opportunity regardless of the time. So now, getting that opportunity this week against H-Town Hoopers after they play on Wednesday, Middle East, that's going to tell us a lot. But right now, what we've seen from them tells us they're okay. So again, like I said at the beginning, we got to give credit to head coach Elijah Wheeler. He's done some really good things. To be able to take a team that lost a number of games early on, that has rallied to win 5 of your last 6, all of those 5 being your 5 wins on the season, that's important. But at the same time, maybe they're just middle class in a league that has a lot of them. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not elite. Talk to you Thursday.